The massive space station hung in the void like a jewel among the stars. It was bigger than most moons and sparkled with lights from 1,000 different worlds. This was the Grand Galactic Council Station, where the most powerful races in the galaxy had met for over 10,000 years. Captain Maya Torres stood at the window of her small ship and looked at the station. She had never seen anything so beautiful or so intimidating. Her hands were steady on the controls, but her heart was beating fast. Today would change everything for humanity, one way or another. Maya was not a tall woman, but she carried herself like someone who had seen battle and survived. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her brown eyes missed nothing. She wore the dark blue uniform of Earth's Space Command, with simple silver bars on her collar that marked her rank. Behind her, Dr. Lisa Kane was checking her notes for the 100th time. Lisa was younger than Maya, with blonde hair and green eyes that sparkled with intelligence. She was the best diplomat Earth had ever produced, and she knew more about alien cultures than anyone else in human space. "Are you ready for this?" Maya asked without turning around. Lisa looked up from her tablet. "As ready as anyone can be when they're about to meet beings who are older than our entire civilization." Maya smiled grimly. "Remember what we discussed. Show respect but don't bow. We're here as equals, not as servants." Their ship docked at one of the smaller ports on the station. Maya and Lisa walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that glowed with soft light. Strange symbols floated in the air, and the very atmosphere felt heavy with age and power. Other beings moved through the corridors with them. Maya saw tall, graceful figures with pointed ears and silver hair who could only be elves. Their skin seemed to glow with inner light, and they moved like dancers. One of them looked at Maya with eyes like liquid starlight, then turned away as if humans were beneath notice. There were other creatures, too. Tall beings made of living crystal that chimed softly as they walked. Reptilian forms with scales that shifted color in the light. Insect-like creatures that moved in perfect formation, their compound eyes reflecting everything around them. Finally, Maya and Lisa reached the main council chamber. It was enormous, with a domed ceiling that showed the stars beyond. In the center was a circular platform surrounded by raised seats arranged in tiers. Each section was designed for a different race, with environmental controls suited to their needs. Maya took a deep breath and walked onto the central platform. Lisa followed, carrying a small case with Earth's formal application for council membership. The chamber filled with the representatives of the elder races. In the highest tier sat Elder Celestine Dawnbringer, an elf so old that her hair was pure white, and her eyes held the wisdom of millennia. She looked down at the humans, with the patience of someone who had seen countless younger races come and go. To her right sat Sylviana Moonwhisper, a younger elf with silver hair that seemed to move like liquid metal. Her blue eyes were sharp and calculating, and Maya could see immediately that this one would be trouble. Sylviana was known throughout the galaxy as someone who believed deeply in elven superiority. In another section, General Zarath of the Saurian Empire lounged in her seat like a predator. Her scaled skin was deep red with black markings, and her yellow eyes fixed on the humans with obvious hunger. The Saurians were warriors by nature, and Zarath had conquered more worlds than any other general in their history. The insectoid section buzzed with activity as Hive Queen Vexra communicated with her drones through chemical signals. Her forearms moved constantly, and her compound eyes seemed to look in all directions at once. The hive mind she commanded spanned dozens of worlds and billions of individual beings. Finally, there was Kalaneth of the Prism Collective. She was a being of living crystal, her form shifting between different geometric shapes as her thoughts changed. Light passed through her body in beautiful patterns, and when she spoke, her voice sounded like music played on crystal bells. Elder Celestine raised one graceful hand, and the chamber fell silent. "We have called this session to hear the petition of the race called humans. They seek membership in our council and recognition as equals among the civilized races of the galaxy." Maya stepped forward. "Honored representatives, I am Captain Maya, Torres of Earth's Space Command. With me is Dr. Lisa Kane, our finest diplomat and xenobiologist. We come before you not as supplicants, but as representatives of a young but determined species that wishes to take its place among the stars. Sylviana's laugh was like silver bells, but there was no warmth in it. Equals? You have been in space for what, 50 of your short years? We elves have traveled between stars since before your species learned to make fire. General Zarath leaned forward, her teeth showing in what might have been a smile. I have studied your military capabilities, humans. Your weapons are crude, your ships are slow, and your soldiers die easily. What could you possibly offer to this council? Dr. Lisa Kane opened her case and pulled out a data crystal. We offer innovation, determination, and the perspective of a species that has had to fight for every advancement we've made. We may be young, but we learn quickly, and we never give up. Vexra's voice buzzed from multiple throats at once. The Hive has analyzed human efficiency. You are chaotic, disorganized, and wasteful. Your individuals pursue conflicting goals instead of working for the greater good. You would disrupt the harmony we have built. Kalaneth's crystalline form shifted to a deep blue color. The collective consciousness of the prism agrees. Humans show signs of aggression and unpredictability that make them unsuitable for civilized society. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, when you have matured. Maya felt her temper rising, but she kept her voice steady. You judge us by your own standards, but perhaps your standards are not the only ones that matter. We've brought peace to our own world and explored space despite having no one to teach us. We've solved problems that would have stopped other races. Elder Celestine's ancient eyes studied Maya carefully. Child, you speak boldly for one so young, but boldness without wisdom is dangerous. Your species has a reputation for violence and destruction. Even now, you carry weapons in a place of peace. Maya's hand moved instinctively to the sidearm at her hip. We carry weapons because we've learned that peace must sometimes be protected by those willing to fight for it. Sylviana stood gracefully, her robes flowing around her like liquid light. And there it is. Violence is your first answer to every problem. You would bring war to our peaceful galaxy. We would bring balance, Maya replied firmly. Sometimes peace is maintained by those who are prepared for war. General Zarath's eyes gleamed with interest. Perhaps the humans could serve as a warrior. Cast for the civilized races, they seem suited for crude violence. Vexra's chemical signals filled the air with the scent of agreement. The Hive concurs. Humans could be useful as a labor force, properly supervised and controlled. Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. She looked around the chamber at faces that showed everything from amusement to contempt, but no respect. These beings weren't considering humanity as equals. They were discussing humans like livestock to be managed. She stepped forward, and her voice carried clearly through the vast chamber. I see now what this really is. You didn't bring us here to consider our application. You brought us here to offer us chains dressed up as membership. Elder Celestine's expression didn't change. We offer you guidance, child. Your species is too young and too dangerous to be trusted with full membership. Accept our wisdom and serve the greater good. Maya looked at each of the elder races in turn, memorizing their faces. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the chamber. Then let me make something clear to all of you. We came here offering friendship and cooperation. We hope to find allies and teachers among the stars. Instead, we find masters who want slaves. She paused, and the silence stretched like a held breath. So let me give you a warning that I hope you'll remember. Choose war, and you choose death. The chamber erupted in laughter from every section except the human platform. Sylviana's musical voice rose above the rest. Death? From you? Oh, little human, you have no idea what real power looks like. Maya didn't smile. She didn't argue. She simply turned to Lisa and nodded toward the exit. As they walked away, she heard General Zarath call out behind them. You have 3 standard days to return and accept our terms. Submit to proper guidance, or face the consequences. Maya didn't look back, but as she and Lisa left the chamber, she was already planning for war. 3 days passed, like a whisper in the void. When the deadline came and went without word from Earth, the elder races began to move. They had expected the humans to return, begging for mercy and accepting their place as servants. Instead, They got silence. Sylviana Moonwhisper stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Starlight's Grace. Around her, a fleet of elven vessels prepared for what they assumed would be a simple demonstration of power. The ships were things of beauty, their hulls made of crystalline materials that bent light around them like flowing water. Energy fields protected them like shields of pure light, and their weapons could tear holes in space itself. "How many ships do the humans have?" asked Commander Lyrelei Starweaver, a young elf with hair like spun gold and eyes the color of spring leaves. She was new to the fleet, but her family had served in the Elven Navy for generations. Sylviana smiled as she reviewed the intelligence reports. Perhaps 50 warships in total, scattered across their tiny territory. Their largest vessel is barely a quarter the size of this ship. We could destroy their entire fleet with 3 of our dreadnoughts. Lyrelei frowned as she read over the human specifications. Their weapons seem crude, but some of these designs are unusual. These kinetic cannons fire solid projectiles at incredible speeds, and these nuclear devices— barbaric weapons for a barbaric people, Sylviana waved dismissively. Energy shields will stop their primitive projectiles, and their nuclear weapons are too slow to hit a properly piloted elven ship. This will be over before it begins. In another part of the galaxy, General Zarath was having a similar conversation with her officers aboard the dreadnought Blood and Honor. The Saurian warship was a massive thing, built like a predator with weapons bristling from every surface. Its armor could withstand the heat of a star, and its guns could crack a moon in half. "The human colonies have no orbital defenses worth mentioning," reported Colonel Sevron, her aide. "Mining stations, factories, civilian transports. They'll surrender the moment they see our ships." Zarath's forked tongue flicked out to taste the air. "Don't be so certain. These humans have something in their scent that reminds me of cornered prey. Cornered prey can be dangerous." "Dangerous." Sevran's laugh was a harsh hiss. "General, with respect, they're mammals. Soft, weak creatures who die if you look at them." "Wrong. What could they possibly do to us?" Meanwhile, the human ships were moving. Commander Ashley Brooks stood in the war room of the battleship New York, studying holographic displays that showed enemy fleet movements. Ashley was a small woman with red hair and freckles, but her green eyes were hard as emeralds. "Elven fleet just jumped into the Titan system," reported her communications officer. "Estimated strength is 20 ships, including 3 dreadnoughts." Ashley nodded calmly. "And the Saurian force?" 40 ships moving toward the mining colonies in the Hermes cluster. They're not even trying to hide their approach." Ashley smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Of course they're not. Why would they hide when they think they're hunting sheep?" She turned to her tactical officer. "Are our preparations complete?" "Yes, ma'am. All civilian ships have been evacuated from the target systems. The mines are in place, and our special packages are ready for delivery." In the Titan system, Sylviana's fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. The system contained 3 human colonies and a major shipping hub. It should have been defended by at least a squadron of warships, but their sensors showed nothing. "Where are they?" Lyrelei asked, her voice puzzled. "Hiding, most likely," Sylviana replied. "Or perhaps they've already fled like the cowards they are. Begin scanning for their ships. We'll destroy them quickly and move on to the next system." The elven ships spread out in a standard search pattern, their sensors probing every asteroid and moon. That's when the humans struck. The first ship to die was the destroyer Moonbeam. It had moved too close to what looked like a dead asteroid. When the rock split open and revealed itself to be a human ship covered in mining equipment, nuclear warheads, accelerated to impossible speeds by magnetic launchers, slammed into the destroyer's shields. The elven energy barriers, designed to stop energy weapons and slow-moving objects, did nothing against solid projectiles moving at a significant fraction of light speed. The destroyer came apart like a flower blooming in reverse. "Impossible!" Sylviana gasped as alarms began screaming across her bridge. "Our shields should have stopped those weapons." More asteroids came alive, around them. The humans had turned their mining ships into warships, hiding among the rocks and debris of the system. Kinetic rounds and nuclear missiles poured from concealed positions, while human ships that looked like cargo haulers revealed hidden weapon batteries. Lorelei watched in growing horror as another elven ship, the cruiser Dawn's Light, was torn apart by weapons that should have been useless against their technology. "They're using our own tactics against us," she whispered. "Ambush and misdirection." In the Hermes cluster, General Zarath was discovering that human mining colonies were not the helpless targets she had expected. The first facility her ships approached looked abandoned, its orbital platforms dark and lifeless. When her ships moved in to investigate, the platforms came alive with weapon fire. "What is this?" Zarath snarled as her shields flared under bombardment. "Those are mining lasers." "Industrial equipment repurposed as weapons," her tactical officer reported. "They've turned their entire industrial base into a fortress." Humans had done exactly that. Every mining laser had been converted into a weapon. Every cargo container had been filled with explosives. Every civilian ship had been turned into a missile guided by a volunteer crew. But the most shocking discovery came when Saurian Marines tried to board one of the stations. The humans they fought were not the soft, weak creatures the Saurians had expected. These were miners and factory workers who had trained for this moment, and they fought with a desperation and cunning that caught the reptilian warriors off guard. Human tactics were unlike anything the Saurians had faced. They used the environment as a weapon, turning their own facilities into death traps. They fought in close quarters where the Saurians' size advantage became a disadvantage. Most disturbing of all, they showed no fear of death. One human woman, a shift supervisor named Janet Kelly, held a corridor against 6 Saurian warriors using nothing but mining explosives and her knowledge of the station's layout. When her position was finally overrun, she triggered charges that brought down half the station's outer hull. Back in the Titan system, Sylviana was learning hard lessons about human ingenuity. Her ships, built for graceful combat between energy weapons, were being systematically destroyed by kinetic weapons they couldn't effectively counter. "Pull back to long range," she ordered. "We'll destroy them with our superior firepower." But the humans had an answer for that, too. As her ships tried to retreat, more hidden vessels appeared. These weren't disguised miners or converted cargo. Ships. These were purpose-built human warships, ugly and functional, with armor plating that seemed to shrug off elven energy beams. Lorelei stared at the tactical display in disbelief. "How are their ships so heavily armored? Our weapons should cut through any material." The answer came from an intercepted human transmission. "Energy absorption plating," a human voice reported calmly. "Their fancy light shows are just feeding our capacitors." The humans had studied elven weapons and designed armor specifically to counter them. The energy that should have destroyed human ships was instead being absorbed and redirected to power their own systems. Commander Ashley Brooks watched the battle from her command ship, staying safely out of range while her forces engaged the enemy. Her expression was calm, almost bored, as she watched elven ships die one after another. "Ma'am," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the elven flagship. Put it through." Sylviana's face appeared on the screen, her perfect features marred by shock and growing fear. "This is impossible. Your weapons, your tactics." "How?" Ashley smiled coldly. "You made the mistake of thinking we were like you. You've been top predators for so long that you've forgotten what it's like to be prey. We haven't. We've spent our entire history fighting each other, learning from every defeat, adapting to every threat. But your technology is primitive." "Maybe. But we know how to use what we have, and we know how to fight." The battle in both systems continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The elder races had expected easy victories against helpless humans. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that turned every disadvantage into an advantage, every weakness into a trap. When it was over, Sylviana limped back to council space with less than half her fleet. General Zarath had lost even more, and for the first time in her career, she had been forced to retreat from a battle. Lorelei sat in her quarters after the battle, staring at recordings of the human ships. They were ugly things, built for function rather than beauty, but there was something about them that she found deeply unsettling. They looked like they had been designed by people who understood war in a way her people had forgotten. She opened her personal files and began studying human history. What she found there would haunt her dreams for cycles to come. The humans hadn't just fought each other occasionally, they had been at war almost constantly for their entire recorded history. They had fought with sticks and stones, with swords and guns, with tanks and aircraft and nuclear weapons. They had learned lessons written in blood across thousands of years of conflict, and now they were applying those lessons to space warfare. For the first time since the battle began, Lyrelay wondered if the elder races had made a terrible mistake. The humans hadn't been boasting when their captain warned them. They had been trying to save lives, the wrong lives, as it turned out. The news of the defeats spread through the galactic community like wildfire. For the first time in 10,000 years, the elder races had been beaten in battle by a species they considered primitive. In council chambers across the galaxy, emergency sessions were called to discuss what had gone wrong. Captain Maya Torres stood in the war room deep beneath the mountains of Colorado, surrounded by holographic displays, showing ship movements across a dozen star systems. The room hummed with activity as officers coordinated the largest military operation in human history. "Status report," Maya said calmly, though her eyes betrayed the intensity beneath her controlled exterior. "Both Elven and Saurian fleets have withdrawn to their core systems," reported Admiral Patricia Cole, the gray-haired woman who commanded Earth's Third Fleet. "They're requesting reinforcements from their allies." Dr. Lisa Kane, now wearing the uniform of a military advisor, looked up from her intelligence reports. "The Crystalline Collective and the Hive are mobilizing as well. They're treating the defeats as a wake-up call rather than a reason to negotiate." Maya nodded grimly. "Good. That makes this easier." "Easier?" Lisa looked puzzled. "Maya, they're bringing their full military might against us. The combined elder races have thousands of ships." Maya smiled, and there was something predatory in that expression. "Lisa, you're thinking like a diplomat. They've just told us exactly where their fleets are going to be, and they're grouping them together for maximum efficiency. From a military standpoint, they've just made our job much simpler." Commander Ashley Brooks entered the room carrying a data pad filled with production reports. Her red hair was tied back severely, and her green eyes sparkled with fierce determination. "The industrial conversion is complete. Every shipyard in human space is now producing warships, and our manufacturing output has increased by 400% in the last month." "How is that possible?" Lisa asked, still struggling to understand the military mindset that now dominated human leadership. Ashley's smile was sharp. "Because we built our entire industrial base with this possibility in mind. Every civilian factory was designed to be converted to military production within weeks. Every cargo ship was built with the structural framework to mount weapons. Every mining operation was planned to double as a fortress." Maya walked over to a large display showing human space. Red dots marked military facilities, while blue dots showed industrial centers. Lisa gasped when she realized that nearly every blue dot was surrounded by defensive positions. "You've been planning for war this entire time," she said quietly. "We've been planning for survival," Maya corrected. "The moment we left Earth's atmosphere, we knew we'd eventually meet other species. We hoped for friends, but we prepared for enemies." Dr. Lisa Kane felt a chill as she began to understand the scope of human preparations. "The mining ships that ambushed the Elven fleet. Purpose-built warships disguised as civilian vessels," Ashley confirmed. "The mining equipment was real and functional, but the ships were designed from the ground up for combat. We've been building them for 20 years. "And the industrial facilities? "Every single one can be converted to a fortress within hours. The workers aren't just employees, they're trained militia. The equipment isn't just for manufacturing, it's weaponized." Maya turned to address the room full of officers. "Gentlemen and ladies, the elder races think they're fighting a war against a young species with primitive technology. They're wrong. They're fighting a war against a species that has been at war with itself for 50,000 years, and has finally learned to apply those lessons on a galactic scale." On the elven homeworld of Silvermoon, Elder Celestine sat in her crystal palace, reading reports that made no sense to her ancient mind. The humans were not fighting like any species she had encountered in her long life. Their tactics were chaotic, unpredictable, and devastatingly effective. "They attacked our forward base with cargo ships," reported Admiral Theron Starfall, one of her most experienced commanders. Cargo ships filled with explosives and guided by suicide pilots. Who does such a thing? Celestine's expression was troubled. A species that values victory more than individual lives. How many did we lose? The entire orbital platform and 3 escort vessels. The humans lost 12 cargo ships and their crews. 36 lives lost to destroy a facility that took us decades to build and was defended by thousands. Celestine shook her head slowly. They trade lives like currency. Young HFY Starweaver stood in the corner of the chamber, her golden hair dim with worry. She had been studying human history and culture obsessively since the first battle, and what she had learned terrified her. "Elder," she said quietly, "may I speak?" Celestine nodded graciously. "Of course, child. What wisdom do you have to offer? I've been studying the humans, and I think we're making a fundamental error in how we understand them." HFY moved to the center of the room, her voice growing stronger. "We keep calling their tactics barbaric and their technology primitive. But we're missing the point." Admiral Starfall snorted dismissively. "What point could there be? They're savages who throw away lives for minor tactical advantages." "No," HFY said firmly. "They're not throwing away lives, they're investing them. Every human who dies in battle teaches their species something new about how to fight us. They're learning faster than we are because they're willing to pay the price for that knowledge." She activated a holographic display showing human military evolution over the past month. "Look at their ship designs. Each generation is better than the last. Their armor is adapting to our weapons. Their tactics are evolving to counter our strategies. They're not just fighting us, they're studying us." Elder Celestine leaned forward, her ancient eyes focusing intently on the data. "Continue." "They've been at war for their entire history. Not occasional conflicts like we've had, but constant, brutal warfare that never really ended. They've developed military thinking to a level we can't comprehend because we've never needed to." Admiral Starfall waved dismissively. "Military thinking? They barely understand energy manipulation or faster-than-light physics." "But they understand logistics," HFY countered. "They understand mass production, rapid deployment, and battlefield adaptation. They understand how to turn an entire civilization into a war machine because they've had to do it before." In the Crystalline Collective's central consciousness hub, Kalaneth struggled to process the reports coming in from the front lines. The crystalline beings communicated through harmonic frequencies, and the current harmony was one of deep confusion. "The humans are using sonic weapons against our ships," reported Veltar, a military coordinator whose crystal body pulsed with frustrated red light. "Crude sound-based attacks that shouldn't affect our crystalline matrix at all." "But they do. Affect us," Kalaneth observed, her own crystalline form shifting to dark blue. "How?" "They've somehow determined the exact harmonic frequencies that cause resonance cascade failures in our crystal structure. Our ships are literally shaking themselves apart." Kalaneth's form flickered through several colors as she processed this information. "That should be impossible. It would require detailed analysis of our crystalline composition and acoustic properties. The frequency signatures suggest they've been studying fragments of our technology for years. Every piece of crystal we've ever traded with other species, every sample they could acquire through diplomatic channels, they've analyzed and tested." The realization struck Kalaneth like a physical blow. "They've been preparing to fight us specifically, not just developing general weapons, but creating tools designed to exploit our particular vulnerabilities." Meanwhile, in the depths of human space, the true scope of human preparation was becoming clear. Ashley Brooks stood in a facility that officially didn't exist, watching as workers assembled weapons that violated several galactic treaties. "The sonic disruptors are ready for deployment," reported Chief Engineer Maria Santos, a stocky woman with calloused hands and sharp eyes. "We've got enough to equip every ship in the fleet." "And the other projects?" "The neural disruptors for the Hive are still in testing, but preliminary results look promising. The quantum entanglement scramblers for Elven energy weapons are ready for mass production." Ashley nodded with satisfaction. "How long have we been developing these?" "Officially, we started the moment we learned about the different alien races. Unofficially, we've been working on theoretical xenobiology and xenotechnology countermeasures since before we left Earth." Dr. Lisa Kane walked through the facility with growing unease. Everywhere she looked, she saw weapons designed to kill specific alien species in the most efficient way possible. This is what we've been doing while pretending to seek peaceful contact. Maya Torres appeared beside her, having moved through the facility with the quiet efficiency of a career soldier. This is what we've been doing to ensure we survive peaceful contact. Did you really think we'd approach unknown alien species with no defensive preparations? But this isn't defensive, Lisa protested, gesturing at a production line creating weapons that could disrupt Hive Queen pheromone communications. This is designed for offensive warfare. The best defense is a good offense, Maya replied calmly. We hoped we'd never need any of this. We planned, so that we'd be ready if we did. Ashley joined them, her expression serious. Lisa, I understand your concerns, but look at it from our perspective. We knew that contact with aliens could go one of two ways: peaceful cooperation or violent subjugation. We prepared for both possibilities. But you prepared more thoroughly for war than for peace, Lisa observed. Maya's expression hardened. Because throughout human history, the species that didn't prepare for war were the ones that got conquered or extinct. We've learned that lesson, too well to ignore it now. Back on the council station, representatives of the elder races met in emergency session. The initial confidence had been replaced by growing concern as reports of human capabilities continued to pour in. General Zarath paced back and forth, her tail lashing with agitation. They're not fighting like any species we've encountered. They adapt faster than we can counter their adaptations. Hive Queen Vexra's chemical signals filled the air with the scent of anxiety. The collective consciousness is struggling to process their tactical decisions. They seem to operate without central coordination, yet achieve unified objectives. Because they don't need central coordination, Elder Celestine said quietly, her voice heavy with the weight of realization. Each human unit is trained to think independently while working toward common goals. They're like a hive mind, but one made up of individual consciousnesses rather than drones. Sylviana Moonwhisper stood by the great windows, staring out at the stars. We've awakened something terrible. We thought we were dealing with another young species that needed guidance. Instead, we found the galaxy's apex predators. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For 10,000 years, the elder races had been the undisputed masters of the galaxy. Now, for the first time, they faced an enemy that might actually be better at war than they were, and that enemy was just getting started. The turning point came without warning, as the worst moments in history often do. Hive Queen Vexra, frustrated by her force's inability to make progress against human defenses, made a decision that would change the nature of the conflict forever. The human military installations are too well defended, she buzzed to her war council, her forearms moving in agitated patterns. But their civilian colonies are soft targets. We will demonstrate the cost of defying the elder races. In the new Geneva system, 2 million humans lived and worked on a terraformed world that had taken 50 years to build. The colony was home to families, schools, research facilities, and the dreams of a species reaching for the stars. It had no military value beyond its symbolic importance as humanity's first major colony outside the solar system. The Hive fleet arrived without ceremony. 50 ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their biomechanical hulls glistening like the carapaces of enormous insects. They moved toward the planet with methodical precision while broadcasting a simple message. Surrender now, or watch your civilians die. Governor Helen Rodriguez stood in the colony's command center, her weathered face grim as she watched the approaching fleet. She was a grandmother who had helped plan this world's first settlements, and she knew there was no hope of military rescue in time. Send the evacuation order, she said quietly. Get as many people off-world as possible. Her aide, a young man named Tommy Park, looked up from his communications console. Ma'am, the transport ships can maybe carry 50,000 people. The rest— I know, Helen said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Do what we can. The attack began at dawn on the colony's main continent. Hive ships descended through the atmosphere like falling meteors, their weapons systematically destroying anything that could support human life. Cities burned, spaceports were melted to slag, and the carefully tended farms that fed the colony were turned to ash. Governor Rodriguez stayed at her post until the end, coordinating evacuations and rescue efforts, even as the command center shook under bombardment. Her last transmission was received by ships throughout human space. Tell them we didn't surrender. Tell them we faced death with dignity. The New Geneva colony died in 6 hours. When the Hive ships finally departed, they left behind a world of cooling ruins and 2 million human graves. The news reached Earth 12 hours later. Captain Maya Torres received the report in her command center, surrounded by her staff. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Dr. Lisa Kane was the first to break. She had known many of the colonists personally, had attended their children's birthday parties and their weddings. "They killed civilians," she whispered, her voice hollow with shock. "They murdered children." Maya's face was carved from stone, but her eyes burned like nuclear fire. When she spoke, her voice was quiet and precise. "Send a message to all human forces. Effective immediately. We are no longer bound by the conventions of civilized warfare." Ashley Brooks looked up from her tactical displays. "Ma'am?" "The gloves come off," Maya said, her words falling like hammer blows. "They chose to target civilians. They have forfeited any right to mercy or restraint." Lisa Kane stared at Maya in growing horror. "What are you saying?" Maya turned to face her, and Lisa stepped back involuntarily from the expression she saw there. "I'm saying that we offered them a clean war between soldiers. They chose to make it dirty. Now they get to learn what humanity looks like when we stop holding back." Admiral Patricia Cole leaned forward in her chair. "What are your orders, Captain?" "Activate Protocol 7, Maya said without hesitation. The room fell silent. Protocol 7 was a contingency plan that most of the officers had hoped would never be used. It was humanity's answer to total war, developed during the darkest days of their own history and refined through decades of strategic planning. "Are you certain?" Admiral Cole asked quietly. "Once we cross that line, there's no going back." Maya looked at the tactical display showing the dead world of New Geneva. "They already crossed it for us. Send the authorization codes. Across human, space, warships that had been operating under strict rules of engagement suddenly found themselves unleashed. Ships that had been holding back their most devastating weapons began using them without restraint. Facilities that had been disguised as civilian installations revealed their true military nature. The first target was a Hive nursery world where young drones were raised and educated. Commander Ashley Brooks led the attack personally, her face emotionless as she watched human ships systematically destroy every installation on the planet's surface. "Ma'am," her weapons officer said uncertainly, "there are civilian populations down there." Ashley's voice was ice. "They stopped being civilians when their queen decided to target ours. Fire all weapons." The Hive world burned just as New Geneva had burned. But the humans didn't stop there. They began hunting Hive support ships, the vessels that carried food and supplies to frontline forces. They targeted communication relays that coordinated Hive operations across multiple systems. They struck at the very foundations of Hive society with surgical precision and ruthless efficiency. General Zarath learned about the new human tactics when her supply lines simply disappeared. One day, her fleets were being resupplied normally. The next day, every transport and cargo ship in 3 systems had been destroyed. "How?" she demanded of her intelligence officer. "How did they find our supply ships? They were operating in deep space along randomized routes." Colonel Sevron's scales had turned pale with stress. "They're using some kind of new tracking technology. Our ships are being hunted by stealth vessels that appear out of nowhere, strike without warning, and vanish before we can respond." What Zarath didn't know was that the humans had been studying Saurian ship emissions for months. They had learned to track the unique energy signatures that Saurian vessels left in their wake, following them like bloodhounds following a scent trail. The Crystalline Collective suffered even worse losses. Human forces began using weapons that specifically targeted the quantum frequencies that held crystalline consciousness together. Entire ships full of crystalline beings simply stopped thinking. their consciousness scattered to the cosmic wind. Kalaneth watched in horror as ship after ship in her fleet went dark, their crystalline crews reduced to mindless mineral formations. "They're not just destroying our ships," she reported to the collective consciousness. "They're destroying our very essence." But the cruelest blow was yet to come. On the elven homeworld of Silvermoon, Sylviana Moonwhisper was meeting with her military advisors when the attack began. It wasn't ships or armies that struck the heart of elven civilization. It was information. Human intelligence operatives, working through networks they had built over years of apparent peaceful contact, released detailed files about elven society throughout the galaxy. Trade secrets, military weaknesses, private communications between elven leaders, and most damaging of all, evidence of elven manipulation and exploitation of younger races. "They've been recording everything," Elder Celestine said in dismay as reports flooded in from across elven space. "Every diplomatic meeting, every private conversation, every secret deal we've made." Lyrelay Starweaver stood in the council chamber, reading through the leaked documents on her personal tablet. "This goes back decades. They've been watching us, learning about us, documenting our weaknesses since before we even knew they existed." The leak destroyed elven credibility throughout the galaxy. Species that had trusted elven guidance for centuries suddenly saw evidence of how they had been manipulated and controlled. Rebellions began breaking out on worlds that the elves had governed for millennia. "How did they gather all this information?" Sylviana demanded. "Trade missions, diplomatic exchanges, cultural programs," Lyrelay replied grimly. "Every time we allowed humans to visit our worlds, they were gathering intelligence. Every gift we accepted, every technology we shared, they were learning how to use it against us." Dr. Lisa Kane sat in her quarters aboard Maya's flagship, staring at reports of the devastation human forces were causing across the galaxy. The species she had once served as a diplomat had become something she barely recognized. Maya found her there, sitting in the dark with tears streaming down her face. "Having second thoughts?" she asked gently. "We've become monsters," Lisa whispered. "We're destroying entire civilizations." Maya sat down beside her. "No, Lisa. We're fighting for survival the only way we know how. They made the rules when they decided to target civilians. But we're better than this. We're supposed to be better than this." Maya was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was heavy with regret but firm with conviction. "We are what we've always been, Lisa. We're a species that will do whatever it takes to survive and protect our own. The elder races forgot that survival sometimes requires becoming something terrible. And after? When this is over, how do we live with what we've done?" "The same way we've always lived with it," Maya replied. "We remember the cost, and we try to make sure it was worth paying." On the council station, the surviving representatives of the elder races met in emergency session. The confident rulers who had dismissed humanity as primitive were gone, replaced by beings who had learned to fear. "They're not trying to conquer us," Elder Celestine said quietly. "They're trying to destroy us completely." General Zarath's tail lashed weakly. "My fleets are cut off from supply lines. My soldiers are starving in space while human ships hunt them like prey." Hive Queen Vexra's chemical signals carried the scent of despair. "The collective consciousness is fragmenting. Too many drones have been lost. Too many hive nodes destroyed. We're losing our ability to coordinate. We have to consider surrender." Kalaneth's crystalline form flickered through colors of defeat. "Surrender?" Sylviana laughed bitterly. "To whom? They've made it clear they don't want our surrender. They want our extinction." Lyrelay Starweaver spoke up from her position near the door. "Not extinction, justice." All eyes turned to her. "Explain," Elder Celestine commanded. "They offered us friendship and cooperation. We offered them slavery. They warned us what would happen if we chose war. We laughed at them." Lyrelay's voice grew stronger. "Now they're showing us exactly what they meant. We're not just losing a war. We're being taught a lesson about the consequences of arrogance. So what do you suggest?" Sylviana asked. Lyrelay looked around the chamber at the broken remains of galactic power. "We learned the lesson, and we hope they're willing to teach it without killing us all." Outside the council station, human ships waited in the darkness. Not attacking, not demanding surrender, just waiting. Like predators who had cornered their prey and were deciding whether to kill quickly or let them suffer. The choice, they seemed to be saying, was still available. But time was running out to make it. The final battle came to the Grand Galactic Council station itself. Captain Maya Torres stood on the bridge of her flagship, the dreadnought Endurance, watching as the massive structure grew larger on her view screen. Around her, the largest human fleet ever assembled, prepared for what would either be the end of the war or the beginning of something even worse. "All ships report ready," announced Admiral Patricia Cole from her position at the tactical station. 200 vessels, including 30 dreadnoughts and 50 support carriers. Dr. Lisa Kane, now wearing the insignia of a military advisor, looked at the ancient station with something approaching sadness. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. 10,000 years of civilization, and we're about to destroy it." Maya's expression was unreadable. They had a choice. Every step of the way, they had a choice. The station's defenses were formidable. Energy shields that could stop a meteor storm surrounded the structure, while weapons platforms that could crack a moon's surface tracked the approaching human fleet. But the defenders were not the confident elder races who had once ruled the galaxy. They were the broken remnants of civilizations that had learned too late what humanity was capable of. Sylviana Moonwhisper stood in the station's command center, her once perfect robes now stained and torn. Around her, the survivors of her people worked desperately to coordinate a defense they all knew was hopeless. "Elven ships are in position," reported Commander Theron Starfall, though his voice lacked its former confidence. "What remains of them?" Lyrale Starweaver approached Sylviana carefully. The young elf had been arguing for surrender for weeks, but the elder race's pride had prevented them from accepting the inevitable. "Sylviana, please. We've lost. Continuing this fight will only bring more death." Sylviana turned to face her, and Lyrale was shocked by what she saw. The proud elf leader looked ancient, her eyes hollow with loss and regret. "Do you think they'll show mercy if we surrender now, after everything we've done?" "I think they'll show more mercy than we showed their colonists," Lyrale replied firmly. Before Sylviana could respond, alarms began wailing throughout the station. The human attack had begun, but it wasn't the devastating assault the defenders had expected. Instead of immediately destroying the station's shields and weapons, the human ship spread out in a defensive formation and simply waited. Maya Torres opened a communication channel to the entire station. Her image appeared on screens throughout, the massive structure, and her voice echoed through corridors where beings from dozens of species huddled in fear. "Representatives of the elder races," she began, her tone calm but implacable. "6 months ago, I stood in your council chamber and offered you humanity's friendship. You responded by demanding our submission. When we refused, you chose war." She paused, letting her words sink in. "You have learned what war with humanity means. Your fleets are destroyed. Your supply lines are cut. Your colonies are in ruins. You have 2 choices remaining: surrender unconditionally or watch us finish what you started." In the council chamber, Elder Celestine sat heavily in her throne, looking every one of her thousands of years. "How did we come to this?" she whispered. General Zarath paced restlessly, her natural instincts warring with the reality of their situation. "We are warriors. We do not surrender." "You are dead warriors if you don't," came a new voice. Lyralai Starweaver entered the chamber, but she was not alone. Behind her walked a small group of beings from various younger races, species that the elder races had dominated for centuries. "Who dared bring these lesser beings into our sacred chamber?" Sylviana demanded. "I did," Lyralai replied firmly, "because they have something to say that you need to hear." A small, furry creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a raccoon stepped forward. This was Ambassador Kryn of the Valdani, a species that had been under elven protection for 300 years. "The humans contacted us 2 weeks ago," Kryn said in his squeaky but determined voice. "They offered us something you never did, a choice." "What choice?" Elder Celestine asked. "The choice to be free," replied another voice. A tall, thin being with blue skin and silver eyes spoke from behind Kryn. "The humans showed us the recordings of your secret council meetings. We know how you've been manipulating our development, keeping us dependent on your guidance. More voices joined in as representatives of a dozen younger races entered the chamber. All of them carried the same message. Humanity had offered them something the elder races never had: equality. Hive Queen Vexra's chemical signals filled the air with confusion and anger. They seek to turn our subjects against us. Your subjects? The blue-skinned being laughed harshly. We were never your subjects. We were your slaves, and you were so good at it that we didn't even realize it. Commander Ashley Brooks appeared, on the main view screen, her red hair gleaming under the bridge lights of her ship. The younger races have made their choice, she announced. They're under human protection now. Any attack on them will be considered an attack on humanity. Sylviana stared at the screen in disbelief. You're stealing our protectorates. We're liberating your slaves, Ashley corrected coldly. There's a difference. The chamber fell silent as the full scope of their defeat became clear. The humans hadn't just won a military victory. They had dismantled the entire social structure that had kept the elder races in power for millennia. Kalaneth's crystalline form flickered through colors of despair. What do you want from us? Maya Torres' image appeared on the main screen again. Unconditional surrender, complete disarmament of your military forces, reparations for the damage you've caused, and most importantly, recognition that all sapient species are equal under galactic law. And if we refuse? General Zarath asked, though they all knew the answer. Then we finish this war the way you chose to fight it, Maya replied. With the complete destruction of your civilizations. Lyra Lai stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Or we can choose to learn from our mistakes. We can accept that we were wrong, that our pride blinded us to the truth about ourselves and about humanity. You would have us grovel before these upstarts? Sylviana demanded. I would have us live, Lirelei replied simply. I would have us survive to maybe someday earn back a fraction of the respect we threw away. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was inevitable. One by one, the representatives of the elder races accepted the bitter truth. They had lost not just a war, but their entire way of life. Elder Celestine was the first to formally surrender, her ancient voice heavy with the weight of defeat. The Elven Concordat accepts the terms of surrender. General Zarath took longer, her warrior's pride warring with her survival instincts. But when she saw the tactical displays showing the complete destruction of her military forces, she too bowed her head. The Saurian Empire surrenders. Hive Queen Vexra's surrender came as a chemical signal that smelled of grief and acceptance. The collective consciousness of her people had been shattered, and rebuilding it would take generations. Kalaneth was the last to surrender, her crystalline form cycling through every color in the spectrum before finally settling on a deep blue. That indicated submission. The war was over. Dr. Lisa Kane stood beside Maya Torres as they watched the elder race's ships power down their weapons and prepare to be escorted to processing centers. What happens now? She asked. Maya was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ancient station that had once been the seat of galactic power. Now we try to build something better, a galaxy where strength comes from cooperation instead of domination. Can we trust them to accept that? We'll see. But trust isn't really the point anymore, is it? They've learned what happens when they choose the wrong path. 6 months later, the new Galactic Assembly met for the first time. The chamber was different now, with seats arranged in concentric circles rather than hierarchical tiers. Every species, from the ancient elves to the newest spacefaring civilizations, had an equal voice in the proceedings. Lyra Lai Starweaver, now wearing the uniform of a human naval officer, stood at attention as Captain Maya Torres addressed the assembled delegates. The young elf had chosen to serve with the human fleet, finding in their meritocratic system something her own people had never offered her. The charter of this new assembly is simple, Maya announced. All sapient species are equal. All worlds have the right to self-determination, and no species, no matter how ancient or powerful, has the right to rule over another. Dr. Lisa Kane, now serving as the first Secretary General of the Assembly, stepped forward to present the founding documents. These principles are written in the blood of those who died because we failed to understand them before. We must not forget that cost. In the Elven section, Sylviana Moonwhisper sat quietly, her once proud bearing now marked by humility. She had been allowed to retain her position as an Elven representative, but only after publicly acknowledging her people's crimes and committing to making amends. The Saurian delegation was led by Colonel Sevron, General Zarath having died in the final battle rather than accept capture. The reptilian officer had adapted to the new order with the pragmatism typical of her species. The remnants of the Hive and the Crystalline Collective were slowly rebuilding their societies under human oversight, learning to function as individuals, rather than collective consciousnesses. But perhaps the most significant change was visible in the youngest delegates. Children of multiple species sat together in a special observation section, learning about cooperation and equality from the beginning, rather than having to unlearn centuries of prejudice. As the session concluded, Maya Torres walked through the corridors of the station, now renamed the Unity Station. Memorial plaques lined the walls, honoring the dead from all species who had died in the war. At the center of the memorial wall was a simple inscription: "Choose war, and you choose death. Choose peace, and choose life." But underneath those words, in smaller text, was another message that captured the hard-won wisdom of the new galaxy. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of justice. Dr. Lisa Kane joined Maya at the memorial. "Do you think it will last, this peace we've built?" Maya smiled, and for the first time in months, there was warmth in that expression. "It will last as long as people remember the cost of the alternative, and we'll make sure they remember." Outside the station, ships from a dozen species patrolled together, their crews working side by side, regardless of whether they breathed oxygen or methane, whether they were made of flesh or crystal or something in between. It wasn't the peace that humanity had originally hoped for when they first approached the stars. It was something harder won and more precious, a peace built on mutual respect rather than mutual fear. And in the end, that made all the difference.